Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Tuesday, June 16th, 2015, around 3:28 in the afternoon, Billerica, Massachusetts. It's been mostly cloudy today. The sun's trying to poke through. It's a little on the humid side, but it's not going to be very warm. Tomorrow, it's going to be nice and dry in the 70s and sunshine. One little tidbit, Donald Trump, real estate mogul and businessman, has announced he's running for president of the United States in 2016. Good luck to him. And that's about it on the news. My second video blog subject of the day is about the former NHL team, the Quebec Nordiques. The Quebec Nordiques were in existence from 1972 through 1995. And for the first 7 years, they played in the old WHA, and then from 1979 through 1995, the Nordiques played in the NHL. Originally, the team was going to be based out of San Francisco and called the San Francisco Sharks, but the funding for the team in San Francisco collapsed, and it was sold to 6 businessmen in Quebec City, Canada. And they moved the franchise to Quebec, and they named them the Quebec Nordiques. And they played in Le Colisée in Quebec during their time as a franchise. Their first coach was Maurice Rocket Richard, the famous Montreal Canadiens star player and Hockey Hall of Famer, but he only coached 2 games before saying coaching wasn't for him. And Nordiques were a decent team. The first major star was a defenseman named J.C. Tremblay. And the Nordiques were a great team. They won the division in 1974-75, the Canadian division of the WHA, and also 1976-1977. 2 times they went to the AVO Cup, and they won the AVO Cup in 1977. That was the equivalent of the Stanley Cup in the WHA, but by 1978, the WHA was on the verge of collapse, and there was talk about teams being merged going into the NHL, and Quebec was one of the 4 that was admitted to the NHL, along with the Oilers, the Jets, and the Whalers. And the Quebec Nordiques lost all their players except a couple on their roster when they went into the NHL, because most of them were signed like property of other NHL teams, and it was like a distribution draft, and the Quebec Nordiques lost all their players, so they had to start from the bottom up when they went into the NHL in 1979. And the first year, 1979-1980, the Nordiques finished with one of the worst records in the NHL. But they started to build a little bit of a nucleus. Michel Goulet, a forward, who was a scoring machine. And then in 1980, they had 3 brothers defect from Russia to join the Nordiques: Peter Stastny, Anton Stastny, and Marian Stastny. Plus they had Rio Cordier, and they developed a great nucleus, the Nordiques did. From 1981 through 1987, they made 7 straight playoff appearances. They were put in the Adams division of the NHL, and they had some great teams, the Nordiques. They had great rivalries with the Montreal Canadiens. These rivalries were tough and rough. It was like the Battle of Province of Quebec between the Canadiens and the Nordiques and stuff. This was like a great rivalry, like the Canadiens and Bruins, Canadiens against Maple Leafs and other teams. And the Nordiques actually made the conference finals in 1982 and 1985, but they did not make it to the Stanley Cup finals and stuff. And they usually had to face off against either the Canadiens or the Bruins for the playoffs, and the Canadiens and Bruins were real tough during this time period. But by like the late 1980s, the Quebec Nordiques fallen on serious hard times because of the core was aging. Peter Stastny was getting past his peak. Michel Goulet wasn't that great, falling off. Anton Stastny wasn't that great anymore, and Marion Stastny retired. And they had other players try to replace him, like Michel Plett and a few others, but they weren't that good. The 5 straight years, the Nordiques were in last place in the Adams division. They had a decent goaltender, Ron Tugnut, but he was a workhorse and he would lose a lot of games, and plus he would get so many shots on net thrown at him. One time there was a Bruins game where he made 70 saves against the Bruins in 1991. It was a 3-3 tie. That's an amazing game he did. But with the Nordiques falling into last place, they would always get the number 1 pick of the NHL draft. For 3 straight years, they got the number 1 pick. Matt Stastny, Olin Nolan, and Eric Lindros. Plus they had Joe Sakic that they got in a prior draft, and he became a franchise player. And Sundin and Nolan eventually played for the Nordiques, but not Eric Lindros. Eric Lindros was the highly touted junior player in college in the late 80s, early 90s in the OHL, and people were comparing him as the next Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and Bobby Orr, all rolled into one. Eric Lindros played for Bobby Orr's junior team, the Oshawa Generals. And Eric Lindros said, when he says if he was drafted by the Quebec Nordiques, he would not play for them because he just said that a big star in the NHL should not be playing in Quebec City, Quebec, Canada, because he said that there's not too many people who speak English there, and it's like French is a predominantly big language in Quebec City, Canada. And Eric refused to sit out, and he sat out the 1991-92 NHL season to play for the Canadian Olympic team. And when he got back, the Nordiques were working out a trade between the New York Rangers or the Philadelphia Flyers. Eventually, an arbitrator ruled that the Flyers had a great package, so Eric Lindros went to the Philadelphia Flyers for players like Mike Rickey, Ron Hextall, Steve Duchesne, $15 million into cash and a couple of picks. One of the picks turned out to be Peter Forsberg, who became a Hall of Fame player. And with all of these picks, in 1992-1993, the Quebec Nordiques made a big jump in the standings, 52 points in the standings, and they finished with 104 points, making the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, second place in the Adams division. But that had a date with the Montreal Canadiens, and the Montreal Canadiens beat them in the playoffs. And then the next year, 1993-1994, the Quebec Nordiques took a big step back, not qualifying for the playoffs. And this is around at the time when the Canadian dollar was getting weak, and the Quebec Nordiques were losing millions and millions of dollars because they played in an aging arena, the Lake Coliseum, Quebec. They tried to get the government of Quebec to help them bail out for a new arena, but the Quebec government refused. Plus, the team got little or no money because they just had like a French television contract and a French radio contract. At the time, in the early 1990s, there were no French, there were no English-speaking TV or radio stations in Quebec City, Canada. Plus, there were a lot of NHL players who had in their contracts who weren't like of French Canadian descent. There were a lot of them who had specifically in their contracts that they would veto a trade to Quebec City, Canada, to play for the Quebec Nordiques and stuff. And the 1994-1995 NHL season was delayed due to a lockout, and the owner of the Nordiques was continuing to lose millions and millions of dollars, and he put the team up for sale and stuff. The Nordiques finished with the best record in the Eastern Conference in the previous 1994-1995 season. due to Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg, who won called trophy as Rookie of the Year, and they also had a good coach in Mark Crawford, but they got bounced in the first round of the playoffs by the New York Rangers 4-2, and the writing was on the wall. A few days later, after they got eliminated from the playoffs, the Quebec Nordiques were sold to a group that were going to move them to Denver, Colorado, and then they were rebranded as a Colorado Avalanche. The first year the Colorado Avalanche were in Denver, they won the Stanley Cup because they got a goaltender by Patrick Roy. The Canadiens traded Patrick Roy to the Colorado Avalanche. If the Quebec Nordiques were still in existence in 1995-96 NHL season, the Montreal Canadiens would never ever trade Patrick Roy to the Quebec Nordiques, nor they would have traded him to either the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Boston Bruins, the two other hated rivals. He probably would have traded Patrick Roy to probably Florida or Tampa Bay then the arch rivals and stuff like that. So anyway, the Quebec Nordiques had a good legacy in the NHL and stuff. They were a decent team in the 80s, but falling on hard times for several years in the late 80s, early 90s, plus the changing environment of the NHL financial situation just doomed the Quebec Nordiques to be a viable franchise long-term for the 90s or the 2000s and stuff. If they stayed in Quebec, they probably would win the Stanley Cup a couple of times. That would have gotten the Montreal Canadiens even more mad and stuff like that. There's been talk about an NHL team coming back to Quebec City in the near future, the return of the Quebec Nordiques, because they got a new arena and stuff, and there's now a salary cap and stuff, and they could have an NHL team in Quebec City. And there's been big rumors that the the Arizona Coyotes or the Florida Panthers are rumored to be moving and stuff like that, and I would not be shocked if either one of those two teams moves to Quebec City in the near future and gets rechristened as the Quebec Nordiques. I'm putting my money on the Arizona Coyotes moving to Quebec in the near future, because they're running out of Arizona and Phoenix is not an NHL market and stuff like that. There's also been talk about trying to get the Quebec Nordiques as an expansion franchise. The NHL would get $500 million if they got to Quebec City as a expansion franchise, but I don't think that the NHL wants to get those two expansion cities franchises in the United States, because first of all, the television money from NBC, and second of all, they need some teams to round out, to balance the Western Conference. So we'll wait and see about that, but I bet you by within 5 years they'll be back. The NHL will be back in Quebec City, and the Quebec Nordiques will be back again, and they'll start that big rivalry again with the Montreal Canadiens, the Battle of Quebec. So that's about it on that, and I'll be back for the third and final video blog of the night, which will be about former Major League Baseball player and manager Don Baylor. Have a good day, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and like I always say, keep calm, and I'm a Julie Button guy. Bye.